They came from the stars. It began on a Tuesday. One moment, the skies were blue. Planes hummed overhead. Children played on school fields. Office lights flickered in glass towers. Then, without warning, the sun dimmed, blotted out by the sharp, angular silhouettes of ships far too large to be human. They didn't come in peace. They didn't come to negotiate. They came to conquer. The first strike hit Beijing. A flash, white, silent. Then the entire skyline folded in on itself. New York followed. London, Lagos, Moscow. Over 40 cities were reduced to craters in the first 7 minutes. By the 10th, communication satellites went dark. The world's networks blinked into static. At 11:09 a.m. Eastern Time, a message was broadcast simultaneously on every surviving screen. This world belongs to the Drazari Imperium. Surrender and be spared. Resistance ensures extinction. They look like something out of myth, tall, plated in iridescent armor, their voices cold and echoing through translation filters. No one had seen them coming. No one understood their technology, and no one knew how to stop them. Humanity hesitated. Then it burned. In Chicago, Sergeant Elena Ramirez pulled survivors from rubble with bloodied hands, her military radio useless. When a Drazari patrol landed nearby, she used a stolen construction crane to tear through their drop pod. Her squad, 6 survivors armed with pistols and anger, finished the job. Outside a ruined village in Poland, an old farmer watched his fields blaze under plasma fire. He picked up his late son's hunting rifle, whistled to his dog, and walked toward the smoke. In Seoul, teenagers with no military training launched fireworks at a Drazari scout drone. It panicked and crashed. They tore it apart for anything useful. The Drazari were confused. Their invasion plans were built on centuries of precedent. Most species folded within hours. Some even welcomed subjugation. But Earth didn't fall into chaos. It weaponized it. By nightfall, human survivors across the globe were using anything they could find. Molotovs, crowbars, kitchen knives, even sharpened sticks. They struck from sewers, rooftops, forests. They moved in silence, fueled not by orders, but by rage. Commander Varel of the Drazari stood aboard his command vessel, watching footage of a ruined highway in Colorado. A band of civilians had lured a patrol beneath a collapsed overpass and crushed them using a detonated fuel tanker. "This is not anticipated," he muttered. His adjutant hissed in concern. "They have no formal structure, no coordinated armies. And yet they resist." Varel turned to the stars, brow furrowed beneath his helm. They are not fighting to survive. They are fighting because they are angry. In the subways of Manhattan, lit only by broken headlights and burning barrels, Ramirez regrouped with other survivors. Around them, the city was in ruins. But in their eyes, something deeper than fear burned. They didn't have alien technology. They didn't have a plan. But they had fury, and that would be enough. Humanity bites back. They called it a cleansing operation. The Drazari landed patrol units to root out survivors, expecting cowering civilians and disorganized retreat. What they found were ambushes, tripwires, and burning wreckage, built not by armies, but by mechanics, farmers, and furious neighbors with nothing left to lose. In the Appalachian hills of West Virginia, 3 hunters, Jed, Molly, and Red, watched a 6-legged Drazari scout drone creep through the woods. It glowed faintly in the dusk, scanning for heat signatures. Jed didn't wait. With a practiced flick, he tossed a meat-wrapped propane tank downhill. The drone followed it, sensors drawn like a dog to bait. Molly, perched in a deer stand, fired the shot. The explosion rocked the trees, flinging the drone into a ravine. "That's one more metal bastard down," Red grinned, pumping his fist. In Sao Paulo, a group of former gang members turned rebel fighters stormed a Drazari outpost built on the ruins of a soccer stadium. Armed with stolen rifles and homemade bombs, they used smoke and samba drums to disorient the guards before charging. By the time the smoke cleared, they had seized the aliens' comm relays and left their symbol on the tower wall, a red fist and the words, "Terror resist." Half a world away, in the collapsed ruins of downtown Cairo, An old electrician named Yusef hotwired a plasma cannon from a downed Drazari walker. With the help of 2 neighborhood kids, he repurposed the alien weapon into a rooftop turret. That night, when a squadron of Drazari drop pods descended, the cannon lit up the sky, carving smoking holes in their hulls. Everywhere, humanity was adapting. Fast. The Drazari couldn't keep up. Their doctrine was built on fear, shock, and awe. But fear didn't paralyze humans. It sharpened them. It made them clever and dangerous. Commander Virel reviewed another grim report aboard his orbiting flagship. Losses were climbing. Resistance hotspots had multiplied. Their drones were being hijacked, their weapons reverse-engineered. These primitives are irrational, his lieutenant snarled. They fight knowing they cannot win. No, Virel corrected, staring at the footage. They fight because we gave them nothing else. Back in the wreckage of Queens, Ramirez gathered her team, scattered survivors now forged into a unit. Among them, a firefighter, a subway conductor, an ER nurse, and a high school chemistry teacher who'd become their bomb maker. They had no uniforms, no ranks, but they had each other, and they had a plan. A Drazari cruiser was landing to refuel near Central Park. Ramirez's team would strike from the tunnels beneath, plant charges, and detonate it from the inside. She drew a line in the dust with her knife. "This isn't about survival anymore," she said, eyes blazing. "They lit this fire. Now we burn them down." And with that, they disappeared into the dark. One more ember in the growing inferno Earth was becoming. Fear in the void. Commander Virel stood in silence, his eyes fixed on the smoldering wreckage of Cruiser A-17. The assault ship had landed near a human park, what intelligence had labeled an uninhabited zone. It was now a smoking crater. No survivors. Plasma trails and shrapnel wounds marked where human saboteurs had torn through Drazari elite. These weren't tactical armies. These weren't professionals. They were angry civilians with improvised weapons. And they were winning. Virel's second-in-command, Yerrick, approached cautiously. "We underestimated them. Their species exhibits a dangerously high emotional volatility. It disrupts all predictive models." Virel didn't respond. He watched the footage from the park, grainy, chaotic bodycam clips. Humans had emerged from underground, coordinated with no detectable signal, detonated charges, and vanished before backup arrived. One wore civilian street clothes, another a firefighter's helmet. They weren't soldiers. They were survivors. And they were getting smarter. In orbit, the Drazari Council convened, holographic projections flickering in the dim chamber. "This resistance is unacceptable," hissed Admiral Zurith. "The humans are disorganized, weaponless. This was supposed to be a 2-day conquest." "They are not weaponless," Virel interrupted. "They've turned our technology against us. They learned faster than expected. Worse, they refused to submit." A silence fell. Finally, one counselor muttered, "Perhaps we should sterilize the planet. Cut our losses. Withdraw." Zurith snapped. "We are the Imperium." Virel narrowed his gaze. "Then explain why we're afraid to land our own officers without armor escorts." Meanwhile, on the ground, Ramirez's cell was no longer alone. Across continents, resistance units were forming networks. In underground data hubs, scavenge servers were being used to share schematics of Drazari weapons. In refugee camps, mechanics built railguns from scrap metal. In every occupied zone, humans plotted strikes not for survival, but for vengeance. A captured Drazari lieutenant was brought before a resistance outpost in rural France. The interrogator was a linguist-turned-soldier, formerly a professor at the Sorbonne. "You thought we'd give up," she said calmly, speaking through a rough translator device. "You thought we'd kneel." The alien, bound and bleeding, glared back. "You're irrational. Other species accept fate. You cling to chaos." She leaned in. "Chaos is where we thrive." Back aboard the Drazari flagship, Virel stared at the stars, his claws curling into fists. Reports from every sector screamed of sabotage, infiltration, and uprisings. The humans were impossible to anticipate, impossible to contain. "They are not fighting us," he muttered aloud. "They are avenging something." He turned to his command screen. A photo taken from a drone showed a woman kneeling over a destroyed home, holding a blooded child. Behind her, 3 Drazuri troopers approached. The next frame was fire. She had strapped explosives to her chest. The invaders had triggered something ancient and terrible. Fury. The fury that burned the sky. Rain pounded the city ruins as Ramirez stood on the ledge of a shattered tower, staring down at the Drazuri command node below. A massive structure of pulsing metal and humming energy. It had been built atop what was once Times Square. The enemy's arrogance was visible in every glowing panel. This was it, the heart of their operations. Beside her, the resistance team crouched, dirty, scarred, exhausted. None were soldiers in the old sense, but they were veterans of something older than war, survival. Once we take this out, Ramirez said over the wind, they won't have eyes on this hemisphere. It'll buy the others time. Or bait them into a full retreat, murmured the former chemistry teacher, who now wore a combat vest stuffed with makeshift explosives. Ramirez nodded. Either way, we light the fire. Below, Drazuri guards patrolled in tight formations. But their movements were slower now, nervous. Patrols doubled back. Their eyes constantly scanned the shadows. Fear was setting in. The plan was brutal, simple, human. Strike hard, strike fast, burn everything. The team descended through collapsed scaffolding and burst through the outer perimeter. Chaos erupted. Ramirez tossed a Molotov into an energy vent, igniting a chain reaction. Plasma rifles cracked the night air. The resistance moved like ghosts, striking, vanishing, striking again. Within 20 minutes, the command node was in flames. The Drazuri fled, some screaming, others fighting to the last. But they were no longer invincible. They were hunted. Across the globe, similar scenes played out. In Mumbai, refugees brought down a walker with ropes and gasoline. In Canada, a teenager used a hacked drone to drop a brick onto a Drazuri general. In Australia, truckers armed with shotguns formed a convoy that decimated a supply caravan. The resistance was no longer scattered. It was Earth itself. In orbit, Commander Virel watched the flames spread on every screen. Transmission towers fell. Power sources were lost. His elite forces were in disarray. He could feel it now. The pressure. The fear. Earth was not just resisting. It was infecting them with its fury. Yarrick stumbled into the command bridge, bleeding from a deep wound. We've lost control of 3 sectors. 4 more are non-responsive. Casualties. Virel raised a claw. We are done here. You would retreat. No, Virel said quietly. We survived. That is more than many who crossed this world can say. As the order was given, Drazuri ships lifted from Earth's surface, battered and burning, their sleek hulls scarred by human defiance. The fleet turned skyward, limping toward the stars. On the ground, Ramirez watched the sky bloom with retreating fire. Around her, survivors emerged from hiding, bloody, battered, but alive. They are running, someone whispered. Ramirez didn't smile. No, she said. They are learning. She turned, gripping her weapon. And if they come back, we'll teach them again. Because Earth didn't fall. It fought. And in the face of extinction, humanity's fury became the fire that drove the stars back.